Welcome, Florida Politics Now. What a great looking panel we've got here today. Excited to talk Florida politics with all of you. Let's go straight into our first story. Remember Hope, Florida? Huge scandal last year. Well, it's come up again, and it makes sense because it's election season. Let's go ahead and take a look. Season reaches its peak. Democratic Senate candidate Alexander Vindman called out U.S. Senator Ashley Moody, who used to be Florida's Attorney General. Vindman says that when Moody was the AG, she facilitated the transfer of funds to Hope, Florida, though he admits her involvement beyond that is less clear.
I think, to me, if you think about the logic of somebody taking away resources from children to do a favor, a political favor for somebody, that probably is the ultimate test of loyalty.
In a response, a spokesperson for Moody said she had nothing to do with the grand jury report. In fact, her spokesperson said, quote, the senator had no role in any grand jury proceedings and would certainly have no issue with the public release of any report. But Vindman says there is a connection to Hope, Florida at large.
Thousands and thousands of kids could have received health care if she didn't decide to advance her own political aims by signing off on this scheme. So I think this is something that people need to know about.
The Center for Government Accountability tells us the judge is likely to rule soon on if the grand jury report can come out in redacted form, though an appeal then is likely. While Vindman presents the Senate race as himself versus Moody, he faces a primary challenge from State Rep Angie Nixon. All right, with that, happy to take your questions from our great panel from your neck of the woods and whatever your viewers would like to know.
Matt, if you wouldn't mind, just, you mentioned it was a big scandal last year. If you could go just through the basics, previously on, so to speak, of what this scandal was. And I know there were hearings in the Capitol, Republicans grilling other Republicans. How did that where did the dust settle before that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, much more online for anyone who likes to get the nitty gritty. But the basics is this. There's a Medicaid settlement. So the state gets money from this settlement, and they have to decide how they're going to disperse this money and what they're going to do with it. Well, a series of high-ranking officials that implicates the First Lady, that implicates then AG Moody, that implicates now AG James Uthmeyer, they decide to divert some of this money to Hope, Florida. That's what we're talking about. When you talk about the Hope, Florida scandal, that's the organization. They, in turn, Hope, Florida, spends that money on trying to defeat some ballot measures. You might remember we had marijuana on the ballot. We had abortion on the ballot. They spend the money, $10 million worth, about, to try and stop those amendments. Like you said, that caused investigations. One Republican member of the State House, this is his quote, not mine, he called it money laundering. But it kind of petered out after that because some of the witnesses stopped appearing and there just wasn't momentum to keep going. Well, in the background, you also have this grand jury, which is a criminal enterprise. The House investigation is just that, a legislative investigation. You have this grand jury report. Grand juries happen in secret. You don't hear about them until they're over, until somebody gets charged. And so that's why this is coming up again, though no doubt also having to do with this Senate race that has the primary now in just a couple weeks.
Do we know what the end game is for Vindman? Was he wanting this released so maybe somebody else can take a look at this, and then maybe when we have a new governor sworn in January, was he wanting maybe the new governor to take a look at this as well? And then also on the other side too, in terms of the new AG and Uthmeyer, he's running for re-election. Obviously, he was appointed by the governor. Any response from his office?
Yeah, so first question first about Colonel Vindman's endgame. I think if we're being really honest, there are two endgames. He will tell you, one, that he's very concerned about public corruption, that he's very concerned about making sure public policy is followed. We won't go into the whole backstory, but Colonel Vindman became famous for some of these Russia investigations. He's a service member, and so he will tell you that is, one of the reasons is just it's the right thing to do to have this come out. Secondly, he has tried to make this Senate race about himself versus Senator Ashley Moody, who's the incumbent. Well, the thing is, he also has a primary to go through first. So he's trying to posit this as this is simply me versus Senator Moody already, when it's not quite there yet. In terms of the Attorney General's office, I have not yet seen any kind of formal response, though I'll go and check his X account after this. Usually that's where you find their responses. We do know from that Florida Government Accountability Organization that the Attorney General is the one fighting to keep the report closed. So in terms of a public response, no, but we do know in the background that they are one of the objectors, one of the groups trying to keep this report from going out.
So now looking forward into if the grand jury files are released, what is the biggest thing that you'd be taking a look at or that viewers should be paying close attention to?
Yeah, it's going to be to the extent that any of these actors in the background thought they were doing something wrong. That's ultimately what the grand jury is looking into, right? You're looking into criminal investigations. It's pretty clear that there weren't any criminal charges. We would have seen them, of course, on the court docket. So the next thing you're looking into is, well, what exactly were they saying behind the scenes? We have a lot of public comments from now Senator Moody. We have a lot of comments from First Lady Casey DeSantis. We have comments from everyone pretty much on this publicly. But I'd be looking to see what is going on in the background. Grand juries have a lot of power. They can subpoena people, which they can bring people under threat of sanction into the grand jury room and force them to testify. They can release a very detailed report. They can go, hundreds of pages if they want to. And so I think that's really what you're looking into is beyond no criminal charges, what were they actually saying? Gotta love technical glitches. The genius of our Zoom here, our show always works. But I think we're back. Let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll get the gremlins ironed out, and we'll be back. Welcome back. Great to be with you. Of course, we're just talking Senate race. We were talking Hope, Florida. Let's switch over to the gubernatorial race where we had some big reactions to a big ruling earlier this week. Please Take a look.
Republican GOP candidate James Fishback won an important court ruling this week, with a judge saying that Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins failed to meet his burden to kick Fishback off the ballot. And so Fishback, in return, called on Collins to resign his office on Tuesday.
I am calling on Jay Collins to resign from the lieutenant governorship effective immediately. Jay, I respect your service to this country, 23 years in the United States Army. Thank you for that. But I have to be honest with you. You wasted the court's time.
Fishback took particular aim at Collins' use of Florida's matching funds program. Under that program, a candidate for governor can receive taxpayer dollars to partially fund their campaign if they themselves raise at least $150,000 and limit self-serving loans.
This was not about election integrity. This was about rigging an election against a surging campaign in the final weeks before the election day on August 18th.
A spokesperson for the Collins campaign said they didn't have a response at the time, but an advisor posted on social media that the lieutenant governor would not resign and that it was Fishback who violated mortgage laws by claiming 2 primary homes.
He missed a golden opportunity to say, look, I won a major battle here, and here's what I've got planned for Florida. Republicans, please pay attention to me, instead of immediately trying to get tit for tat and try to say, well, I'm better than you, I won the court case.
McManus says Congressman Donalds is still way out in front of both Fishback and Collins, but upsets can happen, especially if the primary election has a stronger than expected turnout.
It's a very, very difficult thing. There can always be upsets, but it would truly be an incredible upset should Donalds not get the nomination.
Natural follow-up to that, Lieutenant Governor Collins has not resigned, despite those calls from Mr. Fishback. So just to close that loop, happy to take your questions.
I'll start. Real talk here. Does Collins really think Fishback is a threat? If polls do show that Donalds is ahead, and you just mentioned she just had the soundbite there, it'd be a shock. Why even pursue this if there really was no avenue for Fishback or even Collins to win?
Yeah, so the straight answer is there's a public statement and then there's a theory. The public statement is that this is just the right thing to do, that we should only have candidates on the ballot who are qualified, and that perhaps Collins could get some of Mr. Fishback's votes. Now, that's news. Opinion is I don't think many of Mr. Fishback's supporters are going to switch over to voting for Mr. Collins, Lieutenant Governor Collins, I should say. Okay, that's one. Two, the theory, if you believe what Mr. Fishback says, is that really Collins is doing this to try to gain good graces with Donalds. Well, why would he do that? If Lieutenant Governor Collins would like to continue to be the lieutenant governor, perhaps those two could link up. I haven't seen evidence to support that, but that is a theory making its way around political circles. And one final point, I will say the Collins campaign, so not a grain of salt, a block of salt, released a poll recently that shows them far and away above Mr. Fishback. So to your point, Robert, if that's true, I don't know that this court case matters, though I'll tell you, if you look at the prediction markets, they will tell you perhaps Mr. Fishback is in second place. So we really don't know. The only thing we know with some certainty is that if you believe the polls, the professors, and the predictions, that the congressman is still way out in front.
And Matt, we're less than 3 weeks to go till primary election day. I know there's been some talk about how the role of the governor or the lack of any endorsement in this race has made an impact. I mean, it's going to be very interesting. Obviously, a lot of folks expect Donalds to win and win comfortably. But any thoughts on how the home stretch is shaping up, especially without that DeSantis role there?
Yeah, that's a great point. I asked Professor McManus, who we just heard from, about that point. She points out it's not unusual for a governor not to get involved especially at the end of their tenure, right? Governor DeSantis is now thinking about legacy, thinking about how he wants to be remembered, and he's thinking about, these are all my children. If I'm the leader of the Republican Party in Florida, I have to have some amount of fairness to all of these. in this case men, but all the candidates. I think it's interesting. One anecdote, whenever Lieutenant Governor Collins sends out a press release, which of course this time of year they send out multiple a day, he really plays up this, DeSantis appointed Lieutenant Governor Collins. That's in the headline there. So he's trying to latch on to that. Mr. Fishback himself is saying he wants to continue the governor's policies. But really, I think Congressman Donalds has been the least effusive in his praise. That's not to say they don't get along. That's not to say they don't have a lot of the same policies. But it's interesting to me that they have not been, in a huge kumbaya moment. The governor has said he will get involved in a time and place of his choosing. That's very vague, so I don't know what that means. But I think, the state of the race is President Trump's endorsement, frankly, I think matters the most to the voters we're talking about for the primary, which is the most partisan voters. I'm not sure even if the governor did endorse one of the other three candidates that would overcome. But it's interesting, and of course, it's not over till the votes are counted.
And have we seen any numbers on viewer, potential voter reaction to this case, whether it's discrediting Collins for bringing this case or discrediting Fishback for having been accused of wrongdoing?
The honest answer to that is it's mostly online that you see that kind of thing. Mostly on X, a little bit on Facebook. I haven't, just to be very honest, have not seen real in-person people talking about it very much. Professor McManus said that perhaps a lot of people don't even know that it's happening. Of course, we do this story, but that only reaches the folks that it reaches. Online, what I've seen is both sides are just dug in. Mr. Fishback's supporters say, to your point, Mia, this is a dirty case. This is, trying to kick me off the ballot. This is un-American. You have Lieutenant Governor Collins' supporters saying, no, this is standing up for the rule of law and repeatedly pointing out that Mr. Fishback did vote in Washington, D.C. So I've seen people pretty much dug in. And that's back to Jacob's question. That I think it's hard to see a lot of movement when everybody is so dug in at this point. And, election days, well, it depends on when you watch this, but 15, 17 days away. All right. Thank you so much for joining us this week, Florida Politics Now. Thanks to our great panel, Tallahassee, Panama City, of course, over in Gainesville. We'll see you next time.